What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations and now the co-host and co-producer of monthly live online conversations that are sponsored by Dove Men Care and also Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. It's not about me, so we done. We are now having another epic conversation. As always, too, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We are all under the sea time right now, and that's not Chicago. You know what that sea time is. And I always like to do research and to find new friends for the Dr. Vibe show. And we have another new friend on tonight, but also, can I say an OG or a veteran? What's better? I don't know.
I'm both. I'm a great fan of gentlemen.
Oh, I like that. So tonight we are very blessed and highly favored to have Dr. Marvin Thompson and Dr. Paul Miller with us. Very important conversation topic. The conversation topic is Black males need to be back in school. They're not right now. And how do we build consistency while they are not? And it's interesting that I put this up on my Instagram page, and one of my members of my community from Africa said, homeschooling, question mark. So I know that that will come up in today's conversation. Because we've got somewhat of a short amount of time with Dr. Thompson, we're going to be brief in regards to the bios. And Dr. Thompson didn't want to introduce himself, so I got to do it as always. So Dr. Marvin Thompson is an educational leader who has spent the majority of his over 25 years in the educational field, turning around schools and challenge communities. The scope of his experiences in schools range from preschool director, elementary school teacher, to district superintendent. I could say so many more things, but I'm going to get down to one of the things that he was very much involved with. He was involved with the documentary on the OWN network called Blackboard Wars, which was nationally televised, bringing about the challenges facing urban schools in America. That content has been shared on a number of platforms, including these, and also won a number of awards: Cable Facts Best Documentary, SIN, the Golden Eagle Award, and I could say more. He's also involved with a great organization called, or CEO of Empowered Ed, an educational consulting firm specializing in organizational systems development. That's enough for him. New friend, Dr. Paul Miller, is the principal and CEO of Green Tech High Charter School, a highly successful school for boys in Albany, New York. I've been to Albany. I went many years ago when I had hair. I went to see some NCAA Final Four tournament stuff there. An expert in urban education, Dr. Miller has specialized in school reform and redesign for over 20 years, counseling school officials. If you're involved in education over 20 years and you're a Black male, do you have to have a beard?
Yep, that's it. That's it. Yeah, okay. Man. You see what you're missing? See, we already knew what club you're not in.
Well, hey, my dad was an educator for 30 years, and I never saw him with a beard.
Well, we need to see some whiskers next time I see you.
All right.
Come in.
Okay. Since taking over Green Tech in 2012, Dr. Miller has turned the school into one of the best in New York State. Under his leadership, the graduation rates have soared, reaching an impressive 95%, with 100% college acceptance rate for graduates. Wow, that's fantastic. In addition, students have earned over $25 million in scholarships, compared to only $200,000 before he arrived. He has been recognized by the city of Albany as a man of valor and as one of the top 40 under 40 African-American leaders by the city of Rochester, amongst many other accomplishments. We're going to stop the accomplishments. We're going to get right to it today. So, right? If you want to read their bios, go to my website and read the posts. They're so long. But let's get down to it, gentlemen. As always, I'd like to say thanks for taking the time. Everyone having a good day so far?
Absolutely.
Every day above ground is good.
I feel you with that. Dr. Miller.
Yes, sir.
You wanted to talk about this subject. Why?
You know, you look at our Black males and see servicing Black males every day. You start to learn about what it looks like for them every day. So what it looks like for them is different. So I don't want to stereotype, but you also have so many young Black men that face so many challenges just to get to school, and then at home and the neighborhoods that they live in. And so now you think about it, that school is this safe haven. School is a safe place where they're supposed to be able to come, where there's structure, where there's rules, where there's routines, where there's 3 meals a day in some cases. Uh, and now they're at home, and some are in very good homes, but others have a lot of uncertainty going on. And so for those young black men that have that uncertainty going on, what are we doing about it? How are we helping them? How are we supporting them? And what are we doing as individuals who are educators and individuals who run organizations and educational institutions?
Nice. Dr. T, anything you want to add to the opening comment?
No, I think Dr. Miller is right on point, and I think this conversation is going to lead into the whys and the whats and the hows, right? So every variable that Dr. Miller mentioned are in the psyche, and I think that's the reality of where we are. We can talk about school all day long, but school is a system, right? It's a system, and like all systems, they're all designed to serve the system. You know, a system is designed to service itself, which means to stay alive, to keep promulgating what it's set out to do. And over the last, I'm 56 years old, and over my lifetime, particularly my educational career lifetime, which spans almost 30 years now, we are constantly reforming that system. And remember, the system, again, is designed to service itself. And as Dr. Miller pointed out, when you look at all the pitfalls, all the challenges that our black males face, and you can expand that concept of the black male experience, which is growing. We already know it's linked to poverty. That's a given. But black males have a very unique experience even outside of the poverty experience. But then they move into other areas. But this system is literally designed to service itself. So as Dr. Miller talked about, when we look at the issues that our young men face, it is literally about what they bring to the table. And more importantly, I think this is where this conversation may ultimately will weave in and out of that, is how are they brought to the table to engage with that system?
Excellent. Dr. Miller, what are some of the conditions that some of our black men are living under and you're seeing them experience right now?
Well, you definitely, there's issues with hunger. There's issues with overcrowding. So we have some of our young men who live in very small residence with quite a few relatives. So imagine if you have a 1-bedroom apartment and you have 10 people living in that 1-bedroom apartment, and you want them to now work online, and there's no quiet space to work online. There's other challenges from not having access and equity to the internet or to devices. There's challenges with not having, like I said, not enough food. There's challenges where they're at home with parents, and you asked me about challenges, so I don't want to leave out my good parents either. But there's challenges with drug addiction. I mean, I've had kids that have walked into their house and seen their mother shooting up heroin. So you see, they have all of these different adversities that they're facing, and we're expecting them, and we're expecting parents who may or may not be equipped to educate them while they're at home. And so that's part of the issue. Is even as someone who, such as myself, I have a doctorate degree, but I'm not strong in math. And so if my kids were to come to me and say they need help with math, I would be the wrong person to be able to do that. So imagine that we have all these other parents who may or may not be equipped, and who don't at sometimes even have high school or college educations, and are not able to provide them with the resources that they need to academically fit those needs. Those are some of the struggles that now they're facing at home, because they could previously come to a school building, if the school building is structured well, and have the opportunity to have excellent teachers in front of them, have people with structure, have rules, have discipline, have food, have all these items that is no longer there because we're stuck underneath these quarantine parameters.
Okay. Dr. T, anything you want to add on to that? Plus, how is this current C situation magnifying those challenges?
No, Dr. Miller laid out exactly the daily challenges of a principal and the environments that he works in today. And even if you're not in urban, you're in a suburban or rural community, you have young people who look like that and have those experiences. But again, we're looking at it systemically, and so systems look at the larger population, look at the majority, because you incorporate testing, you're now looking at numbers that say, hey, what's the majority doing? So we can exclude testing, not as a resource, but as an example of magnifying what Dr. Miller said, right? Because they become outliers in the community. In the environment we're in today, they are magnified 1,000 times. When you turn on the news today in the media, you're talking about COVID-19 and deaths, because we're in a life or death situation. It is what it is. In the daily maintenance or sustenance of life, to be able to do what? And our conversation is about to be able to do what? And education is literally exposing that gap, and is putting in the homes, is putting it in the environments that ultimately schools are designed to try to close those gaps and minimize those barriers. And now we're confronting reality. We're confronting the reality of all of our errors. We're confronting the reality of all of our gaps in our society. We're even confronting the gaps that have not only not been closed, and Dr. Miller will know this as well as anyone, they're expanding. Now, despite the efforts to close achievement gaps, they have actually grown over the years. And every single variable that Dr. Miller outlined are still existing, right? So the system itself, and we have to say this regarding the population that we're talking about, is not doing for the population that it says that it's to do. We go back to No Child Left Behind. We're not even having this conversation. We're not. It was an assumption and an intention before today, before No Child Left Behind. But right now, after No Child Left Behind, we're talking about a measurable effort. How are you doing in that implied effort? Well, we already know that we haven't. We closed schools a month and a half, 6, 7 weeks ago, knowing that gap hasn't still been closed. So we're having this conversation because, and I applaud you, Dr. Vibe, and Dr. Miller, for bringing it to Dr. Vibe's attention. Now, what do we do? That's always been on the table.
Right. Anything you want to add to what Dr. T shared, Dr. Miller?
I definitely have to agree with the brother, because the systems currently are set up for our young Black men to fail. They're not set up to succeed. They're not set up so that our young Black men can academically take advantage of. They're set up for the majority, and they're set up in a way that does not cater to an understanding or empathy of that there are different circumstances. And you go back to the circumstances of even going back to Jim Crow laws, and going back to slavery days, and going back to the whole issue of what was beat, burned, branded into our generations, is that education was not a priority, and it shouldn't be a priority. And so the systems have never been designed for our kids. And so, that's why this needs to come to light. That's why this needs to be talked about, because it's bigger than just the quarantine. The quarantine is a way to say, yeah, we need to be doing these things while they're at home. But these systems also have to change when they're back in their schools, because the schools need to start identifying and seeing these gaps and start closing them, because our young men can't afford to fail. Our jails are filled, and our jails are filled because our education is lacking.
I just want to shout out people who are watching live on Get Vocal and also on YouTube, and also have a question already from a very astute gentleman. Much respect to David Miller out of the Beemore area. And he has a comment here: exposes real challenges faced by school districts. These issues have been grossly ignored over the decades. What advice would you give fathers as it relates to things we can do with our children? The system will not change. So do you want to take that question in real time? I could have saved it till the end, but I like to ask in real time.
Dr. T, you want to take it? If not, I will.
Go ahead, Dr. Miller.
Um, what I would say is I think something is I really believe that as a community we have to, and as fathers we got to start identifying our values and re-identifying our values as men and as Black men. And so I think really doing a good job of raising our boys and our girls absolutely with stronger values and morals, and not allowing the television, the music, the other inappropriate items to raise our kids, the gaming, and putting good hardcore values back in there and trying to reaffirm the Black family structure. And what I truly believe is that we have to take some accountability. And so it's so often that as parents, we want to do what we can to placate our kids, but it's not about being the friend. It's about being the parent. And we need one last pair of Jordans. So, one less pair of Jordans and more time, so, it's tired of, you get tired of hearing parents say that at the end of the day, oh, if he brings home this grade, I'm going to buy him this, because it's not about that material item. It's about those values that you're instilling in that child. It's about the consistency, and it's about you being able to build that child up, believing that education is important. And just, I believe it's our responsibility as fathers to spend that time and not so much about the money. That means take care of your responsibilities now. But on the other hand, it's more about the effort that's put in. And I feel that in so many arenas that at times gets lost, and that can't be a lost art. Those values are so important and so crucial.
Anything you want to add, Dr. T?
I couldn't have said it better. The reality is this, Mr. Miller, I got two Millers, David and Paul. So I'm speaking.
I know. Exactly.
I'm speaking to David. David's question is probably it's an underlying component. There's a narrative being presented around the country, and has been for decades, that Black fathers are not present in the home. They don't have a value in life. You've got the prison industrial complex, and you've got many other factors that are used as evidentiary pieces, when in fact the reality suggests that despite whether or not we're actually physically in the home, Black fathers actually contribute a great deal of time to our young people. And how is that time? I think we're getting down to, as Dr. Miller laid out, all of those variables are so real. And the bottom line is this. When you start dealing with your children, the values that you project to them have nothing to do with obedience to a system. It has obedience to your own expectations. And that's where the concept of values are. And we got to be real clear about what the word values are. It's thrown out there a lot. And I want you to think about how words are used. People can say values, and you can stop there and keep the sentence going. And what eventually happens is that people ascribe their understanding of values for the rest of that sentence. And this is where you get that gap. You get the gap because there was never a moment to clarify, what are those values you're talking about? I think that belies what David Miller's question was. And I think it belies what Dr. Miller was saying. And there's where they're starting to meet. So this conversation that you're hosting, Dr. Vibe, is literally about that very thing. What does a father do? Son, daughter, this is how it's done. This is why. And here's the reality of schooling. School can only give you what you take from it. So when you walk in the door, those values are, I don't use the term values. I use the term expectations, because expectations get closer to defining what that means, what the behavior means. The values are a amalgamation of expectations. And this is why they always never meet. You say values, you're talking about education or expectations that have never been clarified. And then you have interpretation. Oh no, start with I expect. And over time, what you get are values. So when America says values, they're talking about 200 or more years of experiences and expectations that do not include you.
Mhm.
So you can't carry those forward into the classroom or in conversations with their kids without being clear.
All right. So a few quick things. Dr. T, be careful with your microphone because once in a while it's rubbing
You're catching my
on your,
beard.
catching the little bit of rubbing. Second of all, I'm already thinking we need to do a part 2 on this because I don't think we're going to get through everything tonight.
That's
So
right.
just setting your because I knew this was going to be good. It's already gone way above my head, which is a good thing. And third of all, with your gentleman's permission, do you mind if I bring in David Miller just for a few moments?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
David, come on in because when he comes in, I know we're going to get a part 2. Here we go. Hope David's going to make it in.
Gentlemen, how y'all doing?
Hey,
Good,
Dr.
All right.
Miller.
Good, good. Dr. Vibe, how you doing, man?
Blessed and highly favored, and even better with you in the house. And we have to talk tomorrow because you're going to be part of another initiative that you and I talked about a while ago that I'm going to be launching the next week or 2.
Okay.
You didn't know that.
No,
but,
I didn't. But
no, but
the work,
it's all good.
as I was listening to these two gentlemen, the work is so critically important, and there's so many of us out here. I think it's really time for us to connect because there's so many brilliant, bright minds in so many different spaces that have the ability to impact children.
Mhm.
And so that's why this is an important conversation.
Excellent. Anything you want to add to what the gentlemen have already said?
No, other than when it comes to Black children, man, I just think that we're being too nice a lot of times. And the reality is, I just don't see public schools as the way public schools are configured working for Black and brown children. And I think that we have basically two options. Either we look at greater control over schools, and again, I know that's a much larger debate when we talk about charter versus private. But when you look at the data, as both of the gentlemen have indicated, we still have an achievement gap. We still see, again, large. I was looking at some data yesterday. Large numbers of GED diplomas granted in prison. And so there's some really startling realities when we talk about educating Black boys, and then we can't ignore our girls. I mean, if you look at Monique Morris's work, pushed out the criminalization of Black girls in schools, the rate that our and I have 2 daughters and a son, the rate that our daughters are being pushed out of public schools and being arrested speaks to either we're going to get, and I know the term radical frightens people, either we're going to get really radical about public education, or we'll continue to see escalating rates of misery coming in and out of schools.
All right. So what I'm going to do, David, I'm going to exit you a little bit. We're going to get back to our conversation. But again, thank you for making the conversation better. And I will be in touch with you tomorrow. Right, my brother?
Thank you.
Yeah. Good to see you, Mr. Miller.
All right, gentlemen. So always good to have David Miller in the house. Also want to say a big shout out to a gentleman I haven't seen in a long time, Cliff Bodenweiser. It's been a minute, but thank you for stopping by. It's appreciated. Gentlemen, let's get to another conversation topic. What about the lack of access when it comes to education and Black parents' lack of access?
Are you speaking to, well, and let's speak to the COVID-19 situation, because as I said before, and Dr. Miller kind of set the stage for this, whatever we're dealing with now is exposing everything. I mean, we're seeing all the deficiencies. We're looking at a higher death rate in poor communities, and those access variables are wide. We have pre-existing conditions just based on environment alone. But if we're talking about school, the response of schools is to move online. Remember, as I shared earlier, the system is always designed to take care of itself and carry out its mission. As a nation, we've adopted, we're going to supply or provide access to education for every child age 5 and up in the United States of America. Under any circumstances, that system is designed to continue to carry out its mission. Under the current conditions of COVID-19, those barriers, those gaps, those deficiencies that Dr. Miller mentioned earlier, they're magnified 1,000 times. So you have young people, you're going online, great. that services the system's effort, but it doesn't account for the fact that we have homes and communities that don't have that access. We didn't have that access before. When we were assigning homework to students and say, go look this up. Where am I going to go look this up at home? What assumptions are you making by giving me that homework assignment? So we're not just talking about access by structure. We're talking about access by practice. So when we start looking at parents of these population that we're talking about today, most of their reaction, what do I do? There's not a parent out here in any of the scenarios we've discussed that wants their child to fail. What they're wrestling with is, what do I do? What do I know how to do? What do I have access to? And that's the only relevance of this conversation, in my opinion, because we can belabor the inequities in the system. But what we're dealing with right now is the realities of what those inequities mean for our children's future when we know that we have a summer slope already built in to our education system. And the population we're talking about, their slope is even greater than those who have resources. So we're talking now, we've been out 2 months, and then we have the summer coming. When you add all of the time out for school, is this a summer slope or is this a 3-year slope? And when you are in your neighborhoods and you have more time to deepen into some bad practices, bad habits, bad behaviors, or spend more time realizing your own inequities, what does that do to the psyche of a young Black male who's already disenfranchised? Is that a deeper commitment? Does it bring them into greater disparity? Does it open the door when they do return to school for even greater gaps to be closed and greater resistance? That's the real issue on the table. So if we couch those variables as realities, we now have a conversations for parents to know exactly when they say I'm teaching at home. These are not parents who are going to be teaching at home the same way everybody else is around America. These are parents who are going to have to list those things, and that's their teaching. That's the time to set the stage for the expectations I referenced earlier. That's the time to close the gap on the systemic barriers that live outside of school, not in school. That's where this conversation needs to be for the population of people and the people at risk that we're talking about today.
Dr. Miller,
you know,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say, what are your thoughts about the lack of empathy from school districts and educators when it comes to Black boys, not only, I guess, already doing this situation going on right now, but that already pre-existed?
And I want to lead with that. I know that there's a lot of good educators out there. There's a lot of great educators out there. And those ones, I just want to encourage them to keep doing what they're doing. I know they're working hard. Shout out to my staff that I know is out there every day grinding. So I got to throw that in there. But I also believe that there are quite a few gaps. And when I say quite a few gaps, there's a lot of white privilege out there too. There's a lot of white privilege that can't understand that right now 38% of Hispanics and 41% of Black males and minorities in general don't even have access to internet.
Wow.
So when you look at the statistics, 40% don't have access to internet, and we're asking them and trying to hold them accountable for being able to complete assignments. And so again, now we have to put the supports in place so they can do it. But there are so many there's those deficiencies. I've even heard from quite a few people and districts that are stating that there's parents that are stating that they haven't even been contacted by their child's teachers yet, that there's been no communication, that their kids have been out of school more than a month and there's been no communication. There's been nothing that's been done. There's been no there's no localized plan to make sure that the kids are continued educating. So yeah, this COVID took us all by surprise, but it's our responsibility to make sure that we handle it, because our kids, the education, just because we're not in a building doesn't mean education should stop. Education needs to continue. And so it's our responsibility as educators who are still getting paid to make sure that it still continues. Because I believe almost every educator in America who has any type of contract is still getting paid and still should be delivering services on a daily basis.
Let me ask you both in regards to this situation here. Does it have the potential of being a generational chasm?
Absolutely. At this point in time, this is deadly. Like this is at a point where like my brother Dr. T was talking earlier, where the gap is bigger than summer rot or the summer slope. It's what it is this could be generational at this point in time. I have a situation where yearly, I think this year, 70% of my ninth graders that came into me, their reading and their math skills were at a fourth grade level. My sixth
Oh,
graders that came into
wow.
me, their reading and math levels, 50% of them were on a pre-K to third grade level.
Come on.
So hey, I ain't gonna lie to you, brother. So
I know.
at the end of the day, I think the year before, 84% of my ninth graders came in at a fourth grade level. So the districts in the surrounding area that are servicing them are not servicing them properly. And so now not only are they not being serviced, so even though I would like to say that we are servicing them, now they're home and they're away from us due to this quarantine. And so at the end of the day, this is mirrored by the population that is a lot larger than the population that I'm dealing with. This is the problem. This is a problem nationally. You know that they determine by reading skills by third and fourth grade how many prisons they should build. So at the end of the day, if they know how many prisons they should build, that's because our kids aren't able to read the way they need to be able to read. And so there's all these issues that are going on top of now these schools are closed, and there's schools that don't have plans to make sure that their kids are successful. And that's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate that every school in this doggone country should have a plan, and they should be enacting it and should be catered towards all populations, not just some populations.
Dr. T, what do you want to add? That those stats are
They are staggering, and as Dr. Miller pointed out, they've been long lasting. This question started with generational. Your question was, will this be generational? I'm not going to talk about your age, Dr. Bob, but I know Dr. Miller appears to be a younger man than both of us, right?
Hey man, I'm
don't do it. Don't do it. Hey,
I'm getting there.
Dr. Miller, I'm giving you out. Do not take it, man. Take that out. Stay where you are, man. Whatever we're assuming, let's go there. But going back to generational, we're all products of that. Education changes every 12, 14 years. There's always a reform movement. We're all products of that reform movement. So we're already in the generational. What reality is, this change is the biggest generational impact. And this isn't change. This is transformation. See, change is a modicum of difference. This is when we return. And I want you to think about where we are right now. Dr. Miller pointed out no one could have conceived we'd ever have to close schools. Think about the conditions under which we would ever have to do this absent a pandemic. You're talking about a national invasion, parachutes out of the sky, another country invading us. School's not a question. We're talking about a pandemic, an invisible enemy. We don't know. They caught everyone by surprise, as you said, Dr. Vibe. And now here we are using the same tools we've always used, or the ones that have been developed in this emerging atmosphere of education, this plateau, this environment. And what we haven't done, and where the discussion hasn't been, we're making an assumption that we're all going to return to school. This conversation is even born out of some of that, right? And we want to get clear about that. We're assuming that we're going to go back to school and things will be as they were. And they will not be as they were. Number one, whatever gaps existed, they're going to be compounded. What role will testing play in it? And these are things that, to me, not even germane to what we're talking about today. These are just variables. But this environment, in terms of generational, you look at an existing achievement gap. You look at a longer summer slope. Let's call it, that's just for the point of this conversation. We've got 6 to 7 months of children with no school, despite what the school's efforts may be because of the things Dr. Miller pointed out in terms of access and also family dynamics. As in the environment Dr. Miller spoke to, imagine the setting that's not accounted for, that schools do take care of, where you have a child who has a parent who's on heroin or some other type of drug, or just has some aberrant behavior that is not attentive as we assume it should and know it should be. What does that look like? 7 months of that. And you're going to bring that population back in school. They're just happy to not be at home. So you're going to be dealing with schools who will be dealing with transitions that have longer periods of engagement in negative environments. So what should parents be doing now? Dr. Miller talked about the data in terms of achievement gap. Dr. Vibe, I've been on your show over the last several years. You've heard me bring this up many, many, many times. Kindergarten, as a former elementary principal and an elementary teacher, we know several things. When we start looking at Black males in the Black community, and this transcends race, this is a poverty issue. Children who enter kindergarten have fewer a fewer level of vocabulary. So the average middle class kindergarten student has a vocabulary of 9,000 words. The upper class student comes in with 25,000 words. Children in poverty walk in the classroom with maybe 4,000 words. And it starts with the conversations at home. Parents have always been and will always be, can never be taken away, the first teacher. Taught the kid how to walk, taught him how to talk. Your pattern of speech, they learn the speech by sitting in the room, listening to your conversations. They listen to your friends have conversations. So it is no reinforcer that they talk like you, but does that talk translate into what education requires? Ask, and it's real simple. I'm going to go back to conversations, and everybody on this call is going to resonate with. You've been in conversations with people. They'll ask in our communities, and I'll ask you a question, and it's yes or no. It's a yes or no answer, right? In other communities, you better explain why you did that. I asked the question in a full sentence. You don't get to give me a yes or no. I grew up in an environment. I didn't get to give yes or no answers. And if I did give a yes or no, I had to explain it. Why? Oh, man, you going to make me think? Yeah, I want to make you think. I didn't have to agree. I didn't have to be right. And my dad was a Marine, and he used to tell me all the time, by the time I reached 9th grade, I have no idea what you're studying. I cannot help you with your homework, but I expect you to keep succeeding. His questions never asked. He would ask me a question, how do they solve this problem? Y'all, you're going to laugh about this. He would ask me about an Algebra 2 problem. I would make up some BS answer. I'm like, well, Dad, you have to divide X by 2, this by this. He goes, he didn't know. But the mere fact that he got me in a habit, in a pattern of explaining it, when I got in the classroom, I automatically didn't shut down. Now, my dad was no psychologist. He was no genius, but he knew one thing. My expectations will be met. And my role, going back to what you were stating earlier, Dr. Miller, and it goes back to the other Mr. Miller's question. What's the role of the father in that role? Man, you better set some expectations. We just need to teach people how to do it. They already set them. They just need to set them in the context of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Miller, I want to get into a conversation part here about having like a little bit of echo here. So I don't know where it's coming from, but we'll go on. It's gone now, I believe. No, it's still there, but no worries. Doctor, let's have a real talk about Black parents, because I know when we were having our pre-conversation about this, I said, do you guys want to go there? And they said, absolutely, you want to go there. So I'll let you start off, and then I'll duck underneath the table for any missiles or bullets that are going to come out from my monitor. So What do you want to say, or what do you have to say for Black parents when it comes to this subject?
You know, I love our parents, first of all. You know, and I say that because, and I love parents in general, but because Dr. T said it earlier. You know what? No one sends you their kid and says that they want their kid to fail. They send you their kid and they want them to succeed. They send you the best that they have, right? So the best that they have may look different than what someone else's best looks like, but it's their best. And so they're always going to want, and usually when the child leaves for school today, no matter what that parent's education is, no matter what it is, they always say, have a good day in school, behave, do what you're supposed to do. That's a common conversation that our parents have with our kids. Now, whether our kids always get here and choose to make those choices, that's different, you know, and we've all made some weird or awkward choices based on our adolescence and growing up. However, you know, I think it's very important also to really look at in the midst of all of our good parents, there's so many parents that are making excuses, you know, and the excuses are tools of nothingness that build mountains to nowhere. And so, you know, I'm tired of the excuses, people. The excuses are not doing it for us, you know, and we all look at, you know, I came from adverse situations. I came from a situation where I grew up in domestic violence. I grew up where my stepfather was addicted to drugs. I grew up in a situation where sometimes we didn't have enough money for toilet paper. We had to take bottles back. You know what? There could have been a lot of excuses, but we have to turn our excuses into our reasons, right? Our excuses had to become our reasons as why we do what we need to do, but it can't if we don't have expectations and accountability. And so when our kids, you know, it's interesting, like the kids will tell their parents they're doing something, but like, oh yeah, I've been working. I did 3 hours online and I did work, but they sat there with the computer open for 3 hours and did about 15 minutes of work. And the parents are making excuses, said, yeah, he's been working, and haven't went back to check. So it's the accountability, and it's moving to the next phase and removing the excuses. Even though there are some really, really adverse situations, we need to have empathy for those situations, because empathy heals, sympathy kills. So we need to make sure that we're understanding that there are circumstances. We need to put in buffers and barriers for those circumstances, but we need to stop laying down for those circumstances. We need to climb over them, climb around them. We need to run through them so we can be successful, because what's on the other end is it's death. It's like the COVID. The COVID is at the other end of these circumstances. We need to stop the excuses and stop making. I mean, I've had parents watch their child on videotape do something and say, that's not my kid. And, you know, watch them break a window and say, that's not my kid. You see that that's your child. You know your child. You can see your child walking down the hallway and how they walk, how they talk, what they look like. You couldn't even smell them from down the hallway. You know everything about your child. And you know that was your goddamn child on that camera, but that's not your child. So how are you going to hold them accountable if you're not holding yourself accountable? The excuses got to stop. And, you know, and that's just real.
Dr. T, what do you want to add on that? Because I know this is a passionate topic for you too. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Yeah. Yes, we can.
Got you.
And now we lost them. Okay. So no problem. Dr. Miller, and you were real with that. It's a real conversation topic. Let me just do something here. Get Dr. Miller.
I think he's coming back in.
Coming back. He's trying to come back in. Well, okay, he's trying. He's trying. You may need to refresh your screen, Dr. T. For some reason, it ain't making that. Okay, so we'll continue on. What suggestions do you have for a number of Black parents? I think we're going to get Dr. T back in, but let's continue on. Yeah, what sort of suggestions? Or some suggestions you have for Black parents?
Right.
Dr. T.
Can you hear me?
Are you back? Yes, we can. All right.
Yeah.
So what do you want to add on to after that? That was fire.
Yeah, it was fire. Hey, Dr. Miller, you took me back like 20 years. All right. to situation. I'm like, yep, remember that parent? Yep, remember that parent? Like, that ain't my kid, lady. I'm looking right at you. So I can't say enough that parents in this time, it's not about shame, right? And I always had to ask myself, why do parents deny those realities? And it really goes back to a couple of things, some of which are bigger than we are. Dr. Miller, you said something earlier that I used to say all the time to my teachers when they would complain. They didn't come prepared for this. It's the mama's fault. It's the daddy's fault. I'm like, look, Josephine sent us the best she can do. She didn't keep the good kids at home. So what does that tell you about the parent, right? And what do our parents need to know? I think in this time right now, they need to know we're not expecting you to be a classroom teacher. We're not. I know college-educated parents who are struggling with managing their children at home. So imagine what the parent with less resources and less educational background has. This always, no matter what your situation is, it always comes down to your own expectations. I always tell parents I've been in a situation, what made me laugh, Dr. Miller, is when I'd have parents like this and I'd sit with them and I'd say, well, let's have a conversation about Josephine or Johnny, whatever. And I would ask them, when they were born, what expectations did you have for them? And I can't tell you how many times the room went silent. Because ultimately what I'm always dealing with is, look, I'm just managing your expectations. I don't care what the other issue is, whether it's a learning issue or a behavior issue. I can manage the learning issue, but I cannot dictate your expectations. So to help me understand your child a little bit better, what are your expectations when they were born? Because I wasn't there. I didn't conceive them. So when we're talking about COVID-19, you're at home, look, they're yours now. And this is not a problem. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to reset. This is an opportunity to reconnect. I don't have to be a teacher. You don't have to have books. Hell, you probably don't have online access. But what you can do is start a different dialogue and instill some expectations, project them, and then have them begin to own them. What will you do when you go back? What did you want? What's not working? And don't put it on the school to do it for you. We started this conversation when the system serves itself. Unless you got a Dr. Miller as a principal, you can be assured that every teacher, and we got a lot of great teachers out here, but every bit of research says that's always in a school environment driven by its leadership, which shapes its culture. And you've got history, and that leadership's not the building leadership only. You got to look at system leadership too. And that's not just the superintendent, that's board. And you got history. You can impact that. It impacts you if you look at it that way. And then you succumb to it. You begin to, those excuses you referenced, Dr. Miller, this is where we have to stop. We already know what the system is. Or when I look at parents go, what's not working for us? I'm like, what in the world made you think all of a sudden because you had a child, it was going to change for you? It was not, and it has not. When will you own what you're going to get before you walk in the door? When will you set the stage for demanding the level and quality of learning and you contribute and know when, yep, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I want. See, that's where we are right now. As a community, that's where it needs to be. And that conversation has to be prepared for when we return. And also, what if we don't? What other resources are available? That's where the reality of that conversations need to be, because the conversations about returning don't have you in it. It's going to serve itself.
Dr. Miller, anything you want to add on to what Dr. T just shared?
No, I think he hit the nail on the head. Brothers got great insight.
No, I don't have insight. I was looking at the clock and I knew I had 10 minutes, man. That's why I was.
Well, before we Dr. T has to leave. So this is part of my concern, because where I'm living, Ontario, which is a province in Canada, they're saying school is not going to be back minimum till the end of May. Minimum. and they have said nothing about extending the school year. So what happens in school districts, especially to our Black boys, if they don't see school till September?
I mean, that's a problem. That's a huge issue and a problem that it would be nice if that was part of the conversation, because it can't happen. We fall too far behind. But I think it goes back to the previous, where a couple things can be done, and I think it goes back to our parents too. So we can only control the things we can control. So if there is no school, um, there's we can control what we can, and as a personal decision, as someone who runs an autonomous school, that won't be our decision. We're going to make sure that we have a continuous of education. But as a larger systemic issue, as a parent, I think it's back to what can you do to start controlling your own parameters. So even like I think you asked, just to add on, and as I was thinking about it, how do you create the optimal workspace? What does that look like? So you know what? Even if you don't have a large desk at home, but you have a corner of a table, how do you clean that off? And how do you set a ritual and routine? How do you tell your child that every night, you know what, you got to be off your device by 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and you need to be in bed, and you need to be asleep, and there's no game after that, and you need to be up like you had to go to school. You need to get up, you need to eat breakfast, and you need to start doing your work between, by 8:30, and you need to work until such and such time and building in breaks. And then on top of that, if there is no work to be done, how do you start to look for supplemental resources, and you start pulling those resources, which there's a ton of them that are out there nowadays, and we start giving kids what they need and start making that the priority. Even though the kid may want to be playing Fortnite, it would be a lot more advantageous to be able to get them on a routine and schedule. So that's one end. And then the system's asking about the not educating. I mean, that's a shame. And so even if there has to be a continuance of education. So like right now, we're preparing for summer school to have summer school in and out of a building. So we're preparing both ways. So we have that going on. And then we're prepared to, if school is open or if school stays closed. And so it's preparing adequately to make sure that we are able to continue providing the resources. We bought a computer, we bought a Chromebook for every child to make sure that they had access to devices. We made sure that our plan includes daily contact with parents, students, and also with virtual hangouts and virtual classes that differentiate the online instruction to make sure that the students understand what they're able to do. And so it's about building an adequate plan that is supporting our students, especially our young Black men.
So, Dr. Miller, though, I think you are in, that's not a commonplace situation, though.
No, I agree.
So, and I think that's great. I want Dr. T then to address, what about the school districts that don't have that opportunity, that can't buy Chromebooks? What is going to happen to Black boys in the public school system, and what suggestions, whatever, homeschooling or whatever, if say they don't go back till September?
Mm-hmm.
What can be done? What are some best practices? Say those parents go back to work, but their boys aren't going back to school to September. What we do?
Dr. Miller, good question, Dr. Vibe. Before I answer that, Dr. Miller, I want to applaud you for that kind of, forward thinking. And making that extra effort. That just shows how connected you are, knowing what the needs of your community are. So my hat's off to you. And I hope there are other principals who are listening. I know there are a lot of good ideas out here, a lot of people looking for them. I hope what you just shared will be an example for others about what steps they can take, and maybe reach out to their school boards and school districts, because I have to say this, when we start looking at, and we acknowledge that things are not the norm, and they may not be, that also applies to your spending. It also applies to where you spend your resources. So if you're, this is budgeting season for a lot of school districts right now. And if you're serious about improving, and closing those achievement gaps and providing for young people, your budgets and how you spend those resources need to reflect that. Because down the road, when you look back and you identify, why is that gap growing and why did it grow exponentially? You'll be able to look at where you spent your money in a crisis. So thank you, Dr. Miller, for that. But to answer overall what should be done, we've got to take a look at, this is a community issue. And in our community, we do have resources. We have resources, and we keep looking at the system. Remember the system. We have components of the system that we don't use anymore, that because of technology, that we're almost back in the Stone Age, folks, in some cases, right? So where are our libraries and how are they being used? How are we using our school libraries to provide resources to families and parents that don't have access to technology or internet or all of the other vehicles that we're using to promulgate the existing system? So are there opportunities to provide those books and materials and resources to that population? Are there opportunities to reallocate how certain teachers spend their time providing information and strategies to parents absent those resources? So, we have many ways. We mule stuff home. We call it muling, Dr. Vibe and listeners, for those who don't know. Dr. Miller knows what I'm talking about. When we want to get a message home to parents, we put it in the backpack and mule it home. It's called muling. Well, there's a lot of ways to redesign that mule to create resources within your community. And this isn't going home, it's sending it to the home or opening up doors in the community to say, if education is important, and our community loves to talk about our community, we're all for the kids. Well, you know what? Put your money where your mouth is. Tired of lip service, step up and open up. So put your heads together. For all these community leaders, your activism doesn't need to be railed against the system. Turn it inward to what you can do for your system. What resources do we have as a group, as a community, that we need to now make available so that we can support our parents who don't have the resources, who don't know where to start, that we collectively say, this is how we're going to go about it. So let's, we may be isolated in our homes, but we're still part of a community. And that's Dr. Miller's statement reinforces that the community he's a part of it is still thinking about those variables. But schools are not the answer to every one of your issues. So all the people who complain about what hasn't happened as they stand around, you're right next door, you have access. Where's your community leaders? Where are your mayors? How are your libraries being used? Not in terms of space, but in access to resources. And these are the small little things that turn into really big things, because it's going to be the effort now that may influence what that real change and that transformation that I mentioned is going to influence. Those are the variables that be taken into account. This is when those communities can exercise their voice, not by words, not by speeches, not by best intentions, but by evidentiary actions. We did this. I need that to stay as a part of this system now.
Well, Dr. Thompson, your hour is up. Perfect way to end off your time here. Maybe I think you planned it wonderfully. So I'd like to say thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us this evening. And if people want
to, you too, brother. We'll do it again.
And if people want to get in touch with you, Dr. T, how can they do that?
You can reach me by email at drT@drteducates.com or at Twitter at drteducates.
Take care. We will chat soon, Dr. T. Thanks.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. Bye-bye. Well, Dr. Miller, we'll just get some final comments from yourself, and we'll get on out and let people go back to their inside life. Any final comments and suggestions you'd like to make to those out there? Because I know you're part of a charter school, but a lot of Black parents don't have that opportunity.
Right. And so, charter schools are about access and equity as well, and their choice. I'm not pro charter school or pro public school. I'm pro good school. And so, I spent a lot of years in public, spent a lot of years in charter now, and, I'm pro good school. And so when I say that, it's our obligation as educators, it's our obligation as organizations, as systems to put opportunities in place so that everyone can achieve, so that everyone has the ability to be great. So everybody has the ability to be excellent and for excellence. And so when we don't do that and we don't consider the gaps that some of our families, some of our kids may have, and we make these policies for the masses, or we don't consider that these needs may be real, and we look at them as stereotypical, or we look at them as jokes, and we have kids who are going home and who are facing these real situations, it's a catastrophe. And we're going to be adding to the gaps. We're going to see an increase in poverty. We're going to see an increase in prison. We're going to see an increase in violence. We're going to see a ton of increases without proper education. And a lot can happen in these few months. It's getting ready to get warmer out up here in the northern states. And I know it's already gotten a little warmer in the southern states. And you know what? People are going to want to be out and hanging out instead of hanging on to education. So, and when I say that, it's our opportunity to keep them engaged and keep them interested. And the plans have to be put in place. The systems have to be thought of. They have to be organized, and there has to be with care and empathy to make sure that our kids have the ability to succeed and to achieve. If we believe it, they can achieve it. And so we have to put the pieces in place. And it's our obligation and our duty. And as parents, you know what, and not to go back and harp on certain points, but as parents, if you can log into Facebook and you can spend time on Facebook and you have a Facebook account, then you can log your kids in online. You can log your kids in and you can monitor them the same way that you're able to monitor your Facebook account. If that's important to you, your kids have to be their priority, and we have to come together and we have to step up. We owe it to our babies to make sure that they come out of this COVID situation, this quarantine, without additional gaps. We have to help fill all of these and make sure that we fill this unforgiven minute and make sure that the next distance run is one of value.
Wonderful. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share with us this evening. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
The easiest is through my website. It's paulmilleredd.com. And again, that's paulmilleredd.com. I'm also on Facebook at paulmiller.edd, and Instagram, docmiller42, docmiller42. So I'm out there. I'm easy to get a hold of. Holla at me, people. Definitely want to continue to make a difference in our communities. Education is the greatest equalizer.
Wonderful. I'd like to thank also people who made this conversation epic. Cliff Bodenweiser, hadn't seen you in a while. David Miller, thank you so much. Again, Dr. T. Also, we had some people watching on the YouTube platform. Thank you so much for making the effort to take time out of your inside time for some valued screen time. My name is Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, 2018 award winner in the innovation category given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. Also, co-host and co-producer of monthly fatherhood chats online live that are sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization, and Dove Men Care. As always, I like to end my conversations with this: live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. I'd like to thank everyone who watched or listened to this live and on the replay, and stay safe. And especially to the Black men out there, stay in touch with each other during this time, after this time, all the time. God bless, peace be well, and keep the faith. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.